Welcome back, everyone. This is Dave from Korman Productions with my co-host Stacie here to talk about Extended Family Season 1, Episode 1, titled The Pilot. Episode description reads as follows. Jim, a recently divorced dad, seeks the help of his ex-wife and her boyfriend in regards to a mishap with the pet goldfish. The unexpected results of this trio's solutions deepens the bonds of their still-forming unconventional co-parenting arrangement. I dare you to say that 5 times fast.
I'm happy you got through it once.
Yeah, me too, for that matter. The episode was written by Mike O'Malley. He's the producer, he's the executive producer, and of course the show's creator. He has 54 acting credits and a few writing credits as well. And Shameless is actually his most famous example. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that show, but it was quite famous.
Haven't watched it, but I'm peripherally familiar.
Gotcha. And the episode was directed by James Widows, who has a long storied career both in front of and behind the camera. He was a producer on the show Empty Nest, Boston Common, 8 Rules for Dating My Teenage Daughter, which was a comedy starring the late John Ritter. Mm-hmm. And he also directed several episodes of 2.5 Men, which was the show that John Cryer was, of course, starring in.
Yeah, and I said this when we did our spoiler-free of this. I definitely see some overlap between John Cryer's Jim character in this show and Alan Harper.
Yeah. And I actually almost mistakenly wrote in my notes, I mistakenly referred to him as Alan. Throughout, and I had to change it before printing my notes.
That's funny.
Before going any further, I'll tell you a couple of things. One, this is not a sport-free podcast. We already actually did that one. If you haven't watched that, go and check that one out.
Yeah, feel free to check that out. Our spoiler-free review.
There's probably going to be some overlap in the things that we're
talking
about.
A little overlap, right, as we introduce this series again, talking about the first episode.
But if you haven't watched that episode, I highly recommend you go and check it out and then come back and go give us a listen. Secondly, if you're listening on one of the platforms that this podcast is now available on, please subscribe. You'd also head over to my YouTube channel, Korman Productions, where additional content can be discovered. If you're already on my YouTube channel, please like, share, and comment, as well as subscribing to our channel. All right, so Stacie, I do have a shout out.
All right.
Ashley Wright said that this show sounded interesting.
Yeah, it's a fun one. We cover a wide range of shows on our channel, and I think we were due for a little comedy.
Yes.
We cover some heavy stuff.
Yep. A lot of dramas, some sci-fi stuff.
So it's nice to just have a comforting little sitcom, something you can watch a little more casually. I don't know if we're going to be able to dive as deep into a sitcom as we typically do. One thing that's great about a sitcom is the fact that it's allowed to be a little more episodic, a little more like classic television.
Right.
Where even though we're going to have this overlying story of this family and how their relationships change and the story progresses, each episode's going to be its own little contained story. Right? That's the nature of a sitcom is, they don't have to necessarily be watched in order. And I can see they've already switched the order of episodes from how they had originally planned.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So when we first got the pilot available to us to screen, there were photos included for another episode, which they were calling episode 2.
Okay.
But now we've received screeners for episodes 2 and 3, and that episode, in fact, isn't one of those. That's another episode, and they removed the episode number from those photos.
Oh, interesting.
So the one that was originally slotted to be episode 2 is now going to be at some point further down the line.
Okay.
Yeah. So it gives you a little flexibility to do that, right, with a sitcom, more so than some other shows we cover, one of which being NBC's Quantum Leap.
Yes.
Which
is very serialized.
They did a big flip-flop in season 1, and, it was pretty noticeable to us as eagle-eyed viewers of exactly where those cuts were made and all the editing they had to do to make that work within the story.
Yeah, in that specific case, they had shot a pilot. NBC didn't like it. So they reshot the pilot, but they still used that episode. So they had to do a lot of editing and some reshoots, it looks like, to make it look like just an episode somewhere down the line as opposed to the first episode.
Right. And it's nice to just have a show where, you can just watch it casually. It's okay if you miss an episode or 2 of a sitcom.
Right.
You can pick it up anywhere and still enjoy the story and laugh and have a good time.
So, okay, so first episodes are difficult. They're difficult
Right.
to produce.
Pilots are challenging.
And because you have to introduce all the characters, introduce the concept, and at the same time, it's actually hard to talk about a first episode.
Right.
Because we have to do basically the same thing.
Right.
We have to build a foundation going forward to talk about the show.
Yeah.
And it gets easier after the first episode. So this one might be a little bit rough and a
Yeah.
little bit more awkward than usual.
And, that's something that I talked about a lot in our spoiler-free review of this episode is the fact that the central plot line of this episode isn't some grand story.
Yeah.
Right? We're not even spending most of the time in the episode on that story.
Mm-hmm.
We're kind of bouncing back and forth in this episode between
Right.
the story of the week, character building, telling us their whole situation, as well as some flashbacks.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot that they packed into, I don't know, what was this, 22 minutes or something like
21 minutes, according to the counter at the
21
bottom
minutes.
screen.
So, and I had questioned when we were first doing spoiler free that the central plot of this felt pretty tropey,
Yeah, it's
and now we can actually talk about what that is without just using ambiguous terms.
It's a pretty standard
dealing with the dead goldfish,
yes, yeah,
right? I mean,
pretty standard sitcom stuff.
right. It's been done over and over again. The one that comes to my mind quickest is Full House.
Yeah.
Where they ended up buying a whole cupboard full of goldfish to replace it. And I know it's been dead lots of other times. So that's just the one that came right to the front of my brain.
So there were other goldfish that died?
What?
I don't know. Yeah, so you basically said there was a whole cupboard of goldfish?
In that episode,
okay.
Instead of just buying one replacement, they bought like 30 just in case.
Gotcha.
They had them all like tucked away, which is pretty silly when you say it out loud like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, and I said that already, if you listen to our other episode about this, it felt like the right choice. Once everything's said and done, having it be something that we already know what's going on with that. Like, we understand the goldfish. As soon as you find out there's a dead goldfish, we know what's going to happen. We know
right.
they're going to replace it. We know the kid's going to find out anyways.
Right.
It's pretty obvious. There's nothing, nothing so original about that, right?
Yeah.
But it works here because that allows us to spend our time setting up the overall situation of this family and meeting our characters and learning who they are without having to focus our attention so much on the story of the week.
Right. Because, this is a pretty unique concept. And it's actually not something that I was even aware of, but it actually happens in real life.
Right, and that is called bird nesting.
Right.
Which they didn't actually use that term in the show, but they do refer to their apartment as the nest.
Gotcha.
And that's where that comes from, is the parenting style of bird nesting. Which, just briefly, again, what that is instead of the kids bouncing back and forth between two homes, after the parents split, the kids stay in their house. They stay where they've always lived. The parents get separate households.
Right.
And take turns staying in the kid's house, basically.
Now, do they have two separate places that they pay rent on, or do they just go to the same place?
Well, I think it could be done either way. In this show, Jim definitely has his own place.
Gotcha.
And I feel like... See, I don't even remember the mom's name off the top of my head. Julia.
Same name as my daughter.
I feel like she is just staying with Trey.
Okay.
I don't think she has a separate place. Or maybe she did, but I don't think she'd maintain that at this point in their lives.
That sounds pretty expensive, because then you're paying 3 different rents.
Yeah, so I think, especially going forward, we've watched 3 episodes. We're only going to talk about 1 today, but... you've only watched 2 of the episodes so far.
I didn't watch the 3rd one yet.
Yeah, so we've got 3 available to us to review, and I think it's great. I think that after we get past this initial pilot hump of having to do all of this character development, the show really found its place really quickly. And
yeah, I enjoyed episode 2 quite a bit.
Yeah, but just based on the information gathered from the 3 episodes that I've seen, I think that's where we're at, is she's probably just staying with him on her off weeks.
Gotcha.
And
okay.
So they take turns 1 week at a time living in the nest with their kids. So the family is, we already mentioned John Cryer is the dad, Jim. Of course, John Cryer. Everybody knows who that is. You mentioned
Two and a Half
Men, which is probably his most recognizable role, at least in the comedy space, I would say. But he's been around ever since Pretty in Pink in the 80s. You know, he's has a pretty prolific career.
And he actually has a dramatic role, too, as well. He played Lex Luthor.
Lex Luthor.
Yeah.
Right. In several different series.
Yeah.
In, what is that, DC Universe?
Yes. Yep.
I don't know much about superhero stuff.
Yes.
I got that right.
Yep. And congratulations on that.
And the mom is Julia, played by Abigail Spencer. Of course, I love her. She was in Timeless, which is what I know her from. I have a soft spot for time travel stories.
Yes.
She also has appearances in Grey's Anatomy, Suits, and Rectify. And I think we said she wasn't really in a lot of comedic roles that we could find.
No, but she seems to do a pretty good job with it.
Yeah, so she's I think the newcomer to the comedy space out of this cast.
Yep.
And third main cast member.
That would be Donald Faison. I think you have him in your notes as Michael Faison.
Yeah.
He
I don't know where that came from.
I'm pretty familiar with him, having been a huge fan of Scrubs back in the day. And speaking of that show was, it was a comedy show, but it also had some heavy dramatic scenes because, it was set in a hospital.
Right.
So it took advantage of that. There's a lot of talent here that has both dramatic and comedic roots.
Yeah.
So there's room to play with some more dramatic elements in this comedy show.
I think we have a really great cast.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And I'm excited to see how they work together going forward. And it seems like what I've seen so far is there's really some chemistry there. And I think it's going to be a good time.
Yeah, yeah.
Then also we have two children.
Yes.
Their daughter is Grace, and she's played by Sophia Capana. And their son is Jimmy Jr., and he is played by Finn Sweeney.
And he's younger than his sister, right?
Yeah, she's older. She is, I think we got 13 and a half in this episode, they told us.
Yep, and yeah.
He looks a few years younger than her.
Yep.
It's hard to tell with kids sometimes. I'd guess he's maybe 11, 10 or 11.
Yep, makes sense. All right, so do we have anything else to say before we dive right in?
Let's do it. So if you haven't been to our channel before, basically what we do is a scene-by-scene analysis. We talk about everything that happened in the episode and how we feel about it, and get the conversation going from there.
Yeah. And by the way, if you comment, we will shout you out. So yeah, if you have any comments about the podcast or the episode itself, feel free to drop them. All right, so the episode opens with Jim talking to Julie, his ex-wife, on the phone as he enters his apartment.
He's leaving her a voicemail, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah? Okay, that was a voicemail? That was a pretty long voicemail.
I thought it was a voice. Maybe it wasn't. I could be wrong.
So it's actually not his apartment, it's the Nest.
The Nest, right. This is the first time we're hearing it referred to as the Nest.
Yep.
Again, that's a reference to the bird nesting parenting style.
Off the phone, he calls for his son Jimmy to see if he's still alive, and he confirms that he in fact is. And Jimmy says, good job.
Yeah, so he's done his job. He's kept his son alive. And we also learned that the daughter, Grace, has been away at a sleepaway camp. She's coming home today. The bus is dropping her off at 5 o'clock. And
he intends to take a video of the goldfish, as apparently that's something he does when he's been away.
He's been making these goldfish videos, and he plans to screen all of the videos to her tonight. So he hasn't been sending them. I don't think he probably doesn't have the technological know-how to, actually send her videos.
So Jim does not have... No, I'm sorry. Grace does not, in fact, have screeners.
She doesn't have screeners. No,
series.
He said he's going to screen the entire Goldfish series to her tonight when she gets home.
I'm sure that'll be something that'll be very entertaining.
I think he missed the point of taking videos of her goldfish while she was away if he hasn't actually sent them to her.
Right. She can actually see the goldfish live and not have to see videos of it swimming around in its little tank, when she gets back.
Well, she can't.
Yes.
Give her the turn of events.
Yes, but he does not know that yet.
Yeah.
So he's talking about filming the goldfish. He in fact does film the goldfish. And as I'm watching this, and this is before I knew the episode description. Right. I did not know the plot of this episode at all.
Yeah, we were going in completely cold.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, this goldfish is going to be dead.
Yeah.
And sure enough, soon enough, he discovers that the goldfish is in fact dead.
Yeah, and he called this the final installment of Diary of the Teenage Goldfish, and he had the shot staged with all this junk food surrounding the fishbowl, and he was like, I forget exactly what he said, but like, oh, you've got to clean up Googles. Googles is the name of the fish, because, you know, your mom's coming home.
So once he realizes that the fish is dead, he attempts CPR. CPR, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
CPR.
For some reason, it didn't sound right. And it ends up going into his mouth. He ends up spitting it out. It ends up in the cabinet. And that's where we have our credits.
It was a great moment of slapstick comedy. Probably my favorite, visual laugh of this episode. It is him just, like, ingesting this goldfish and then spewing it across the room. It slams into the front of the dishwasher.
Yeah.
If that fish was not dead before...
It definitely is now.
Yeah.
So after the credits, Jim is talking with his wife directly to the camera. They're filming some kind of documentary.
Yeah, we break the fourth wall, right? And it's this like type of it's like a confessional style that you'll see in reality TV. Similar to what's done in The Office, for one example. Yes. And we get that throughout this episode. We're kind of jumping back and forth between what I call in my notes the interview and the story. And the interview's taking place after the events of this episode. And I was curious when we were watching this if that was a storytelling technique that was going to continue.
It seems to be.
It does continue, but it's much more prominent in this episode, and I think we're going to see it in future episodes. Yeah. Which makes sense, because, again, we're setting everything up here.
So, after the credits... Oh, like, I already said that. So, he's talking about how he recently killed his daughter's goldfish. We're introduced to Julia. We see her for the first time. Julia introduces herself, tells the audience they've been married for 17 years. Jim says the happiest day of their lives is the day they got divorced last July. So, it hasn't been that long since they've been divorced. It was a mutual decision, and basically being married was getting in the way of them getting along. So divorce can be a very good thing. Yeah. This is them doing basically, what would you call it? Public relations about their own divorce, basically. Yeah,
they're you can tell from this instantly that these two characters get along really well.
And you would have to.
They had an amicable divorce. Yeah. They're literally finishing each other's sentences during this interview. So they're on the same page. Right. Right, about their life, about their kids, about their divorce. Right. Or at least that's how they're presenting it.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the interview. And they basically said that, physical intimacy dried up in their marriage. And they're just getting along a lot better now that they're divorced.
Doesn't it happen in every marriage?
Well, probably.
I won't, go into that any deeper, but... Yeah, so we cut back to Jim in the past, and...
In the current action of the story.
Right.
Yeah, again, we've got, 3 different timelines in this episode.
It's like we're watching This Is Us, or, talking about Quantum Leap or From. Anyway, so we're right at home with this. The grandfather character, who's actually Jim's dad, comes in.
Jim's dad, which is Grandpa Bobby.
And we don't know the actor's name, unfortunately. We haven't been able to find that information anywhere.
Yeah, because we don't have credits yet. Right. But if you already watched this episode, you probably know.
Yep. So Jim is dealing with his goldfish crisis. He lets his father in on what's going on. And Jim tells him, basically his grandfather's like, he doesn't know how to handle the situation. And his father's basically like, well, that's easy. You just lie about it. Right. And Jim says that kids are smart. His father takes the opposite view, saying that kids are stupid. And then Jim learns that his cat did not in fact die, saving a family from a house fire. But nope, that cat was actually hit by a street sweeper. Yeah. And,
And we proved that the dad's theory that kids are pretty dumb is accurate, because Jim is completely taken aside from this. Like, what do you mean Rusty didn't die a hero?
And yeah, thanks for sharing this information now, all these years later, opening up that wound. But anyway, his father tells him that sometimes you need to be a monster, or being a monster is what parenthood requires. I'm not sure I agree with this logic, but whatever. So back to the documentary, which I guess is what this is. We don't even really ever find out what this is.
I don't think it is anything. It's them talking to us. Okay. Literally breaking the fourth wall. So Grandpa is going to stay with Jimmy while Jim heads off to find Julia and get her up to date on the goldfish situation. And, the introduction of this grandfather character, it seems like he's going to be a recurring character. And I just want to comment, that really helps balance things, because otherwise it would be the mom and her new boyfriend on one side and Jim on the other. And having Jim's dad in the picture just balances it, where we have 2 adults on each side of the family now.
Right. Jim says that they want to tell the audience how much happier they are and how awesome divorce is. And by the way, that is not my experience. Divorce is very much not awesome. I'm just saying. But then again, so for the situation to work, you have to get along really well, which is
really well.
And you also have to have quite a bit of trust in the other person. And that's not a situation that happens a lot, I don't think.
I mean, obviously, when you have kids together, you're raising kids together still, even once you separate. But they're literally keeping a household together.
Basically.
And I definitely have some things to say about that when we get to the second episode. But
okay.
We'll keep that.
All right.
We'll hold on to that because spoilers free on the second episode.
Okay.
Okay, so in this interview, we're now getting our first flashback.
Yes.
We're flashing back to the events previous to Goldfish incident now. And that is we're being told about the reverse wedding ceremony that they had. So when they got divorced, they actually held a reverse wedding ceremony in the church where they got married, where like they wore their wedding clothes. Julia walked backwards down the aisle. They ripped up their wedding vows, and then they had a party with all their friends.
Yeah, this little bit here is probably my favorite of the episode. I love this. I found this really funny. The whole reversing of the wedding and having an actual audience there. And it's also revealed that the only one that was not happy during this party was Grace.
Right. This is where we learn, well, yeah, everybody's great. The divorce is happy, except for the daughter, Grace, is having a pretty rough time of it. She's pretty upset her parents got divorced. And Google's The Goldfish was bought at this time as a means to cheer her up.
Which, at this point, I realized, okay, so on its face, this is a typical comedic trope situation. But really, when it comes down to it, this is not actually about the goldfish at all.
Right.
And we'll get there.
It's about the fact that the goldfish was supposed to be what got her through the divorce. And now if the goldfish is dead,
right,
this is going to be hard on Grace.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Jim finds Julie somewhere. Julia.
She's at a hotel. And she's like, oh, what are you doing here? Going to brunch?
Right.
And we'll find out later what Julia was doing there. But we learned that he found her because he tracked her using the family sharing app.
And they go round and round on this.
Yeah, she's very upset about this revelation. Right. And she ends up opting out of sharing her phone's location. I got a feeling that's going to come back to us in some episode.
Do you think she's going to end up kidnapped or something?
Well, no, I don't think this show's going to go there. But I think it's going to be a matter of like, hey, we need to find her and we can't. Because she opted out of the app.
Okay.
At least I feel it'd be a missed opportunity if they don't use that.
Right. And that's when we meet Trey Taylor, owner of the Boston Celtics, who's dating Julia and is the Donald Faison character. And then we cut to him addressing the camera about the incident, about comparing the Celtics to the redheaded stepchildren, and then finds a family that has redheaded stepchildren. So
this was telling us how Trey and Julia met.
Right.
So we learned that her profession is
public relations.
She's a crisis manager.
Yeah.
So PR, and she was brought in after he had this PR nightmare, and they explain, of course, that what are Celtics?
Right.
That's Irish people, and what are Irish people? They're redheaded. So it was doubly insulting to make a redheaded stepchild joke.
Gotcha. I didn't even get that.
To the fan. They explained it, Dave.
Yeah, well, sometimes
takes a couple beats. So it was not only like an insulting comment, to make. Mm-hmm. It was specifically insulting to their fans.
Gotcha.
Because they have a lot of Irish fans.
Gotcha.
And it was a pretty bad PR foot in the mouth moment for Trey. And Julia came in, and we now get our second flashback of the episode, actually seeing them first meeting.
Right. And
she's telling him, she's giving him a statement to read. And he didn't understand a word of that statement. Neither did I. I have no idea what the heck that statement was about.
Right.
But it worked.
Right, yeah.
He apologized to the public. And Julia and Trey ended up falling in love.
Aww. So in the past, or present day, or whatever the heck.
Back in the present at the hotel.
Jim is finally telling the two of them about the dead goldfish. Julia suggests buying a look-alike goldfish, which he must keep alive till she gets there.
Jim tries suggesting, goldfish only live 6 months anyways.
Right.
But Trey corrects him and says, actually, a goldfish can live up to 15 years if taken care of properly.
So literally, that goldfish could have ended up an actual teenager.
Yeah, and this is something Trey learned at MIT.
Ooh.
So now we know he's smart.
So you go to MIT to learn that goldfish can live for up to 15 years?
Well, I mean, he's a smart person.
Oh, okay.
He did science stuff.
Gotcha. And in one of those topics, one of those classes taught that goldfish can live up to be 15 years.
Yeah.
Okay. I actually think I probably could have learned that just from Googling it, but, whatever. I didn't need the fancy education for that.
Well, the point here is he's presuming some sort of intellectual...
prowess?
Like he's better than Jim, right?
Yeah,
he's like,
okay.
I know more than you do.
Haha, okay. Jim's dad and Jim's son, Finn?
Jimmy,
that's right, Jimmy Jr.
Jimmy Jr.
Yeah.
Finn is a whole different show. That's
Right,
Sullivan's
right.
Crossing. The
yeah.
actor's name is Finn.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where that is.
So he discovers the dead fish in the freezer, asks about that situation.
Yeah, and as a viewer looking at that, instantly,
Right.
that's going to be your demise of this whole plan, is the kid now knows.
So Grace can't handle the fact that she has a dead fish, but this kid that's younger than her can.
Yeah, well, it's not his fish.
I mean, I guess.
And on the opposite side of it, Grandpa don't seem to care.
Right, no.
It's Grandpa dealing with the situation.
Right.
Jim might have been a little more upset if his son found it.
Right.
But,
well, then
Grandpa
don't leave it in
is
the...
like, yeah, it's a dead fish. Do you want a popsicle? Or actually, it was like, do you want a fluffernutter sandwich?
I mean, if he didn't want anybody discovering that fish, probably leaving it in the refrigerator was a bad idea.
Well, he needed to preserve it so he could make sure the new fish looked enough like it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he has to compare them.
Gotcha.
It's real deep.
Okay. The parents successfully get the new goldfish, and Jim learns that Trey. I wrote Taylor in my notes for some reason.
It's his last name.
Okay. Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, Trey Taylor.
So technically, I was actually right.
You were.
All right. That Trey and Julia are getting married, and Jim takes this news very well.
Yeah. So that's what they were doing at the hotel. They were
Yeah.
meeting with a wedding planner. They're engaged. This is the first Jim's hearing about it. He's very happy for himself.
Right.
And I'm guessing because he was paying some sort of alimony, and now he won't have to.
Ah,
they didn't specifically
okay.
say that, but I got a feeling that's where that was headed.
Yep. So Trey doesn't agree with the lying situation. Jim argues that lying is what you need to do to build trust. I'm not sure that I agree with that logic. I'm more on Trey's side here. And, it's a sad state of affairs when Donald Faison character is the voice of reason, because that's not his
and
role.
it seems to be that's where we are in this dynamic. He always seems to be like the smart one in the room, telling them, you guys are kind of sucking right now.
Right.
Are you sure you want to do that?
Right.
Is that really where we want to go with this?
Trey argues that the Grace that he knows is smart and pays attention to detail and is in fact 13 years old, so she should be able to deal with the fact that her fish died.
Right. And the parents just kind of laugh.
Right. Julia says you should never lie. You should never lie unless you can get away with it. Well, that's some deep morals there. And she thinks that they can, in fact, get away with it.
And Jim tells us how he took such good care of Googles.
Yes, apparently not, because
feeding it 5 meals a day.
That's a little bit more than you should.
10 times on Friday.
Mm-hmm.
And now we know why it died.
So Trey argues for telling the truth. Jim and Julia laugh at that. Grace comes home, and her brother basically comes out and instantly spills the beans.
Yeah. He's like, oh, I see you got a new goldfish.
And she's like, what do you mean new? Well, I assume this dead one in the garbage is the old one? And so Jim ends up blaming Trey. Trey, for some reason, decides to take responsibility.
Yeah. He's like, yep, it was me. I killed it. I'm so sorry. Because he's a good guy.
Right,
that's what he's telling us. Trey's not this evil new boyfriend. He's a good guy.
But Grace doesn't... Oh, wow. Grace? Anyway, Grace doesn't buy it.
Yeah,
so
she's... Unlike her grandpa thinks, she's pretty smart. And she instantly knows that Trey's lying to her.
And Trey pretty much sells Jim out.
Yeah, he's like, okay, who killed him, mom or dad?
Right. Jim apologizes, but she doesn't care about the fish at all. She cares about the fact that they killed her family. She says she's a lost soul from a broken family, and it won't be long before she goes straight downhill and ends up, getting addicted to cocaine and drugs and such. They all end up apologizing. Julia tries to play her public relations game, but Grace ends up calling her out, saying, "Hey, look, I'm not a public relations disaster. I'm your daughter."
Yeah, and Julia says, you're right. We shouldn't have, been so enthusiastic about the divorce. And if you need to talk about it, we can talk about it as much as you want and work through your feelings. Jim wants to avoid such talks.
Right, of course he does.
And he suggests they move on and celebrate Julia and Trey's engagement.
And, of course, that results in her dropping the fish.
Because they haven't told the kids yet.
Right. And that means Google's number 2 dies.
Yeah, Google's 2.0 is now dropped on the floor. And this was the second, I had said, the whole, shooting the fish across the room was the first time, the physical, visuals was, this is the second time. Just dropping the fish.
Yeah, that
she
one
killed the next fish now. And we know so much about Jim's character, right? That he's just constantly putting his foot in his mouth like this. And, again, he's reminding me so much of Alan Harper.
Yep.
And I don't know, I guess that's inevitable when, you're used to a actor playing a character for so long.
Right.
And it's an equally comedic role. So,
yep.
I can't help but see that pop through. And then we go back to the interview couch.
Yep, and this time we see Grace, who's saying, and that's how Google's 2 died. And basically how you got Google's number 3.
She's holding Google's 3.0. And that, Grandpa Bobby and Jimmy come in and join them, and we pan away to see they're not actually in any kind of interview.
Right.
They're literally just talking to us. I first watching this, I thought, oh, well, maybe they're in therapy or something, and we're going to reveal a therapist on the other side of the couch. But that's not the case. They just all sat around to, watch television or something. And here it is, our happy extended family.
Yep. And that is... Oh, no. Actually, that's not where the episode ends.
No, that's where the interview ends.
Right.
Now we move forward in time, past the interview, and we cut to the box at the Celtics game.
Yep, and Jim is basically robbing the place. He's taking all sorts of
he's taking everything he can carry.
Right, including a lamp.
A table lamp, and Julie objects.
Right. And
he's like, Trey told me to help myself to anything I wanted.
Right, and I assume that's an extra special lamp. Trey ends up giving the green light on the lamp and says, enjoy it. Jim takes his swag to the car, and that is where the episode ends. And are we talking about episode 2 at all? Doing a spoiler-free conversation?
Well, what can we say without spoiling anything?
I would say that it definitely... See, episode 1, you get a little feeling of the series, but episode 2 and beyond is where we get the idea of what the series is actually going to be like.
Right. And so this one, again, it was this kind of... We all know what's going on. It's a dead goldfish story. And after watching it a couple times, when I took notes, I realized so little of the time is even spent on that story because, like I said, we're bouncing back and forth in time. We have flashbacks, we have the interview couch. Now, I can say in episode 2 and 3, we continue with the interview style, but it's much smaller. It'll be just 1 or 2 little clips. When this felt like it was a continuing thread throughout the episode. So there's going to be less of that kind of bouncing back and forth in the next episode. We're going to get to know a little bit more about all of these characters and their living situation. Yep. Which we
dive into way more in episode 2.
We're definitely going to learn more about that in episode 2, and
I'm actually looking forward to talking about that one.
Yeah,
there's a lot of fun stuff.
Out of the 3 episodes, episode 2 made me laugh the most. I found myself just laughing out loud a lot during that one. So episode 1 just aired before our video dropped, and if you missed it or want to catch it again, it will be available on Peacock streaming as of Sunday morning, the 24th. It's also going to replay in its regular time slot on Tuesday, December 26th at 8:30, 7:30 Central. And then the series will continue with episode 2 on its official release date, which is Tuesday, January 2nd.
Gotcha.
8:30, 7:30 Central.
Okay.
So moving forward, we are at Tuesdays at 8:30 following new episodes of Night Court.
Okay.
Yeah. So make sure you keep checking out the show and then come back and give us a listen.
Absolutely.
And like Dave had said, like a Dave.
A Dave has said, so it's an accurate statement.
Leave us a comment down under the YouTube video with everything that you're feeling about the series, about the actors, about us, the podcast.
If you want to share your feelings about the divorce, or any divorce, we will listen to you, unlike Jim and Julia did to their own daughter.
But leave your comments and we will shout you out when we cover episode 2. And let us know, is this something you want us to keep talking about?
Yeah.
Give us your feedback as far as covering this series, because we aren't entirely sure yet if we're going to cover episode by episode.
Right.
But we might.
Yeah, we could.
So let us know if this series is something you want to keep hearing about.
All right. Stacie can be reached at...
I can be reached on Twitter, X, Instagram, and Threads at TVN Coupon Talk.
If you like this video and want to support the channel, there are a number of ways to do so. You can follow me on Twitter at Korman Productions. You can join one of my Korman Productions Facebook pages. You can buy something from the Korman Productions store on Zazzle. You can buy us a coffee, which is a new way to support content creators such as ourselves. And of course, you can like, share, and comment on this video, as we mentioned several times. And you can subscribe to our channel. This is Dave and Stacie from Korman Productions, signing off.